So all resources can be categorized either as renewable resources or non-renewable resources. Now, these definitions are very straightforward. Renewable resources are resources that can be replenished, such as trees, fish, solar energy. Non-renewables are those that cannot, right? Fossil fuels, minerals, etc. Now, following or if we're trying to meet this definition of sustainable development, right, then with renewable resources, there's a very obvious and easy solution. Right, is that as long as we consume less than the maximum sustainable yield. Now, the maximum sustainable yield is simply the maximum amount that you can harvest without reducing the total stock. So, for example, if a fishery produces 50 tons of fish every year and you consume less than 50 tons, then obviously in the next year you will have the same or more of the stock of fish, and so sustainability achieved, right? So with renewable resources, there's an obvious solution here. Okay, but what about non-renewable resources? Right? How do we develop the idea? Well, what is efficient? What is the optimal? Right? And how can we meet this definition? When we consume, because everything we consume today will be less for tomorrow. Also, so let's start considering the opportunities for the future generation. Right? That can be measured in terms of benefits of these resources in the future for the future generation, right? How much benefit, if we save these resources for the future generation, how much benefit can they get out of it? All right, so here's some data from the World Bank, and this is GDP per unit of energy, right? And this is adjusted for PPP, which is similar as GDP, but just better because now you're adjusting for cost of living. And what we can see here, going back to 1990, which is not that far, not that long ago, right? For every you can for every kilogram of oil, right? This is a non-renewable resource, right? That on average, we are getting $3.45, okay, out of it. And now today we're getting $8.18 for the same physical resource, right? The same kilogram of oil, and basically what that means is we're achieving almost three times the amount of efficiency. Okay, so what this tells us is that we are, as a society, we are becoming more and more efficient, and as the society becomes wealthier, it also becomes more efficient, and that means we can meet this criteria, this sustainability criteria, not necessarily by conserving and leaving the same amount of resources. Right? We just have to be considerate and leave enough resources, so because they can utilize this better. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. So if we want to allocate resource across time, we have to think of the concepts of discount rate. So begin think about that. I'm going to ask you to consider this question: what is the value of $100? Okay. Well, that depends on two things. Depends on what you're going to do with it and when do you need it. Right? If you are hungry now, right? If you are starving now, then the value of $100 is very high, right? Because if you don't get it now, then you can't feed yourself, and then you might die. Right? But then if you already have, if you're already well fed, you have clothing, you have housing, then the value of $100 is not going to be that high, right? Then right. So consider this. Right? What would you rather have, $100 today or $120 in 5 years? Right. Now, most of you will choose probably $100 today. Right. If you need the money today, right? $120. Even though that's not going to be that big. Sorry, 5 years. It's not that long. It's not that long, and $120. You get $20 more, but you like to, you're more likely to choose $100 today. But again, this is different for everybody. But what about, so if you choose $100 today, what about $200? Will this change your mind? Will you take $200 in 5 years instead? Right. Now, if you say you will, if this is enough to change your mind, consider this, right? This is just from this past in 5 years time. So you'll go back 5 years. If you invested that $100 in the S&P 500, right, then equivalently, then today you will have more than $200. Right? Because here, if you invest 10,000, you get more than 20,000. So actually, given this, you will still be better off, right, taking the $100 today. Okay. All right. So now we're getting to something, right? This is the rate of, this is depending on the rate of return, depending on what investment opportunities you might have. So, discount rate. So discount rate represents the urgency of money, how valuable money is to you today. Now, this is very subjective because it's different for everybody because people have very different circumstances and needs. Okay. All right. But everybody has a discount rate, right? Not everybody, right? Because not everybody treats a dollar today the same as a dollar they will get, in the future. Okay, so the question is, how do we estimate this? Okay, can we get a sense of what a person's discount rate is? Well, a couple of things we can observe. For example, in an emergency, how do people borrow money? Now, you can borrow money from your family, you can borrow money from the banks, but what about for people who don't have access to these resources, and then they still need to borrow money? Well, there is the payday loan. So for those of you who don't know, payday loans is basically if you have a pay stub, you show these payday loan centers your pay stub, and they lend you money. Now, these are short-term loans, right? And so they charge a pretty heavy fee, and every time the loan is renewed, you also get another fee, and etc. So basically, this is the pretty typical. Outcome for people who borrow money, right? So if you borrow $100 today, you will owe 145. That is an equivalent of 391%. Right? For most of your student loans, for example, right, you're paying around 6 or 7%. Right? This is a 391% interest, and that's not even the highest. Right? In some states, right, you might get paid. You might people charge or end up paying equivalent of 700% almost. Okay, this is not a U.S. only problem. This is an article from Toronto, Canada, right? And they have so this is an issue everywhere. Okay, now, whether or not you think this should be legal or we should ban this. By the way, we have banned a lot of cities has banned these payday lenders, like these payday loans. Now, that's a separate conversation. What I hope you can observe here is, what does that tell you about an individual? What does it tell you about an individual if they're willing? Right now, nobody's forcing them to do this, right? Nobody's forcing them to take out this loan. But if they're willing to pay 391% on an interest rate for a loan, what does that tell you about their discount rate? This is the lower bound of their discount rate, right? It must be that their discount rate is higher than 391%. Maybe their discount rate is 400% or 500%, right? But thank goodness they don't have to pay that much, right? They only pay this, even though, right, this is a ridiculously high amount, right? It's still better. They're still better off, right, from paying their full discount rate. Right? So it tells you the urgency of money. They need money. This rate here, the interest rate that they pay, give you an indication of how urgent money is to them at that very moment. Okay, all right. So anyway, so something to consider. Maybe instead of banning these payday lenders, we should put more effort into offering better options, better alternatives. Right? And eventually, if we ever offer people better alternatives, then these businesses will go out. Right? They'll lose business anyway, naturally. Right? Okay. All right. So to estimate the present value, right, we will need to borrow. Borrow something from finance. Okay, so we need to make this decision. So we'll use the present value formula. Okay, which is simply future value divided by this discount factor, which is 1 plus r. That's your discount rate. To raised to the t power, or raised to a number of times or years. Sorry. Okay, so. Okay, so we can set this up mathematically now. Compare between these two scenarios: $100 today or $120 in 5 years. All right, present value of $100 today is $100 because you're getting this today. Okay, present value of $120 in 5 years. Well, we take $120 in 5 years. That's the future value, and we divide it by this 1 plus r to the 5th because r is the annual discount rate. So it's 5 years from now. Okay. And so if you choose, right, if an individual chooses $100 today, what you're saying is, right, what you're saying is, mathematically speaking, you're saying that this value is less than the $100. Okay. And now we can quantify this. If discount rate goes up, present value decreases. Right? Money is more valuable today. It will decrease the present value. If discount rate goes down, right, then the present value increases. Money is less urgent. Okay, so with that in mind, we can move on to solving dynamic equilibrium for two periods.